In our next session, we are going to take a look at hands-on demonstration for the policy engine configuration on the ESA. I'm going to start with showing you the topology. I'm going to use this device, this PC, to act as a SMTP host. And this device is going to be connected to the external domain. I'm going to say that we will be sending messages from external.com. So this server is responsible for sending messages from external.com, where our internal domain configured on the test server, this device will act as our internal SMTP server, is going to be set to example.com. Okay, so from the data plane perspective, the session is going to be originated by the external device. It is going to be going via the ASA. ASA is going to get SMTP packets on the outside. We have an access list that permits this communication, and we will then send those packets to M1 of the ESA. And because of the configuration of the host access table entries, we're going to have a match with a policy configured with the accept action, which means that the session is going to be treated as incoming. So we will be testing this flow from the incoming policy perspective. This is going to be hopefully sufficient to understand how the policy engines work. No matter if the session is treated as outgoing or incoming, at the end of the day, it's all about what inspection engines are enabled in a given policy to process the session. We also have one entry defined in our incoming policy for user Kate at example.com, where the policy engines in this case take the default settings. The configuration example that we will be looking at here is based on our previous session. Alright, I'm gonna start with the antivirus engine. We have two scanning engines available locally. You can look for viruses using Sophos or McAfee. It is possible to use both engines in the same time, in which case the device is going to first scan the message using McAfee and then Sophos. Why you might want to use two engines instead of just one? Basically because of the capabilities of these engines. So McAfee is doing better in detecting one type of viruses, as Sophos is doing better in detecting some other malware. That's the reason why you might want to use both in the same time. Okay, as usually, we will activate the engine globally and then tune our policy. So let's quickly take a look at that as well. Let's take a look at Sophos. It says Sophos is enabled. It's on. Okay, McAfee I will not be able to show you, but that's fine. One engine is going to be sufficient to show you the scanning options. Then we go to the policy, and our policy for Kate, we will slightly change the settings here. I will say customize, use Sophos. What types of actions do we have? I can look only for viruses when I do the scan, or I can also try to repair the message, the content, when I find a virus. We will only look for viruses. I can also drop infected attachments if a virus is found. Okay, what else? I can tell it what they want to do with repaired messages, encrypted messages, unscannable, and finally virus infected content. So by default, it is gonna deliver repaired messages, encrypted messages, unscannable messages. They will also get delivered. It is only gonna drop infected messages. The other option is to quarantine or send the infected message inside of a different email as an attachment. But we will drop the message with a virus. We will not archive the original message. Advanced options, I can prepend some text. I can send notification to the sender, recipient. I can modify the message recipient and also send the message to alternate destination host. Okay, we will not be changing these advanced options. I will just submit here. In order to make those changes active, I'll have to commit it, commit everything. And then to show you this in action, we will take a look at the doc CD once again, but this time we will look for antivirus testing. Okay, maybe I will just look for iCar inside of this document. It should show me a sample code for the iCar virus, which is here. So it's documented under antivirus. It's essentially a pretty easy way to test it when you just copy this portion. Okay, I'm gonna mark, let's say, this portion. Not this portion, that portion. And let me open the PC. We will write a new message. Okay, didn't take it. I'm gonna zoom in. Okay, now it should take it. Okay, what they tell you is that you should put it into a text file, change file extension to be .com, but I believe that it is also gonna work when you just put it directly to a message. So we will send another one to Kate. Hello. Again. I'm gonna open the logs. We'll make some space and give it a shot. Okay, now we see that the message was dropped. It found a virus. It didn't try to repair the message. It simply dropped the message and the processing stopped. No other engines in the work queue are involved in inspection of that message. Another topic I want to discuss is content filters, which is a great method of scanning messages looking for certain text or possibly for different variations of a text with the aid of regular expressions. A very powerful engine. You can use it for incoming and outgoing messages for the purposes of, in many cases, just dropping the email based on certain information found inside. But this is not the only action supported. You could also possibly change a part of the message, trigger encryption, send notifications, and activate some other actions when you have a match. Now, the feature is going to be very similar to message filters. Message filters is actually the same type of functionality offered by the ESA. The difference between the two is that content filters are available through the GUI. It will be very easy to configure use this engine, where the other difference is when those two features are processed. So content filters are processed as one of the ESA policy engines, where message filters is more of like a separate feature that kicks in before ESA policies. And now in terms of the policies themselves, the content filters, they apply after anti-spam, antivirus, AMP, and Graymail checks. Okay, what do we have to do to use content filtering on the ESA? Assuming that you want to use some additional features along with this engine, like for example encryption, you will have to define some additional elements on the ESA. For instance, build an encryption profile. And this is because you will have to at some point specify point to this additional component as you deploy the feature. Okay, next we will optionally define a condition or conditions. If you don't specify a condition, the filter is going to apply to all messages processed by that particular mail policy. We will then have to define an action or actions, where action can be non-final, like you can carbon copy message, quarantine, remove attachments, and do a lot of other things. Or action can be final, like when you drop, bounce, skip, further checks, do encryption, or signing with as-MIME feature. So the thing is that you can have just one final action inside a content filter, and this action is supposed to be configured as a last action, because whenever a final action is taken, no other actions are evaluated, no other actions are applied. For instance, I can BCC, I can quarantine, and then I can drop, but I cannot say that I want to drop, bounce, and skip within a single filter, because this is not going to work. Only one of the final actions is always going to be applied. Okay, as a last optional step, you can also use what is known as action variables, which is a way of referring to a certain portion of the message as you build the filter. Right, let's now take a look at that on the appliance. We will go to security, not security services. In this case, we will go directly to mail policies, and we will build an incoming content filter, which we will then have to activate in the policy. So filters are built more of like globally. You can then select them within your policies. I will call it FL1. We will build add condition. Let's build something simple. I'm gonna say that if our subject contains the following text, let's say that this is gonna be hack. This is gonna make my condition. And maybe let's say that the second condition is gonna be the recipient of the message. So if the recipient equals Kate, and if the subject contains this value, hack uppercase, and I'm going to say that all conditions must match, we will change that operational logic here. We will then take an action. And the action is going to be to drop the message. Okay, I'm going to say OK. Just one action final. I'm going to submit. So this is how I build the filter globally. You can also check the description here. In our case, it was not configured. You can take a look at the rules. This is the actual syntax that ESA uses internally to enforce that policy. And this section is going to be critical for a message filtering, as we will see in the next session. And policies is blank in this case because we haven't configured it anywhere. So I'm going to go to the incoming policy. We've got the filter in place. We will now activate it under content filters. And I'm going to do the activation under both policies. We'll say enable FL1. You can define multiple filters within a single policy. And we will also do the same for Kate. It uses the default settings, which is fine. So the filter is now running in both policies, default and the Kate policy. We will now commit, push this change, and it's time to test it. You will send a message to two users, admin and Kate. Okay, in the subject, I'm gonna say hello. This is hack uppercase. We use the contain option. This is also for Kate at example. And I'm gonna say somebody. Okay, the logs are opened. We should see this in action. I will just say send. And let's see what is gonna be the end result of this test. We see that the message was virtually splintered. 1 for K, 1061, 1062 is for user admin. I can tell it based on the policies matched. And we see that 1061, which is Kate. Okay, Kate's got a match. We have a match with Apple 1 in the inbound policy. Message is dropped. Where 1062, we don't have a match, messages delivered. Now, technically, we have a match with the policy, but we don't have a match with the filter because second of the conditions, it didn't meet our criteria.